So it was about 10 years ago, and I was in the supermarket that I'd grown up with in southeast London. I had a moment. I had an epiphany. I was sitting there. I had my newborn child, near enough. He's 1 year old. He was sitting in this metal trolley, and there was these horrible lights above and these horrible beeping sounds of 30 tills strong in this massive supermarket. The trolley was filled with plastic, mass-produced food, most of it which is really bad for you. And I thought, at this moment, this is wrong. This has got to change. I do not want this future for me or for my child. And this set me up on a real path of discovery into a whole new life of sustainability. I'm Ed, I'm 41, originally a tree surgeon from southeast London. I moved down with my family to Kent in 2015 to start a new life on a small 3-acre homestead in the Kent Downs AONB. I started Rebel Farmer in 2019 to create a platform for looking for the complete relocalisation of the food system. I discovered permaculture, and with this idea and access to land and my new role as a parent, I was able to develop a business and look at the basis for a sustainable grassroots movement using the natural principles of permaculture. It was a TED talk that led me into permaculture, that taught me about permaculture, and it was soon after this supermarket moment that I came across this, and it really sort of changed my thinking. Permaculture is this ethical design system. It's based around 3 pillars of ethics: people care, earth care, and fair share. It provides a framework for finding positive solutions to any problems, really. You can apply it to most things to try and find a positive solution to everyday problems. By mimicking the incredible power of nature, we can create abundance without destroying the planet. It was my work in London as a tree surgeon that sort of was my first sort of step towards making this change and trying to find this sustainable, positive solution. I had this thing called green waste. I'd fill my truck up every day, working as a tree surgeon in London, with what was known as green waste, this word waste. Well, what you can do with this green waste is you can break it down, and much like we talked about with Leonie, you can create this amazing compost with this green waste. And I'd learnt this, and I knew that this was my first step towards becoming more sustainable, is I needed to take this waste and turn it into a resource. And this was a moment that I decided to sort of move my life down to Kent, where I had a little bit more space, so that I could actually process this waste that I was creating from my occupation. So, moved down, 2015, I got to this 3-acre homestead, and I had a deep dive into permaculture. I learnt the ins and outs of permaculture and spent a lot of that first winter online looking at YouTube and reading books and creating this design around permaculture that I wanted to implement. There's no rush with permaculture. Permaculture teaches you to observe, observe, observe. Spend the first year observing what happens, and then you can really go out and implement things with the environment that you've been put in front of, basically. So it's a lot of trial and error. That first year was a huge learning journey. I put up a polytunnel and I started some seeds. I got some tomatoes growing, which was amazing, but I put a pumpkin in there and it was bursting out the door. You don't put a pumpkin in your polytunnel, just... So we got through that, and the first year I was still building up. I was collecting these local resources. I was continuing my work a little bit as a tree surgeon. I was piling up these chippings and things on the field. I was processing and selling some local logs, and just starting to get going with this idea. And it took a good couple of years of experimentation to really get going. But in this time, I created some really super rich compost using things. I could actually, with my tree surgery, I had a truck, so I could bring in local bedding, muck, chippings, and I could also bring in other waste products. So I brought in local sawdust, I brought in some local mushroom waste and coffee grounds and all the peelings and everything, and started to make this super rich compost, which I applied to the ground in a no-dig way. So no-dig teaches you not to disturb the soil, and you can just apply this mulch to the top of the top of the soil to create a permanent no-dig bed. And this suppresses everything underneath, suppresses the weeds, and creates a super rich soil. The worms do the work. So again, re-evaluation, relearning. Each year we were learning, and I started to get really good at growing food. Before long, I was creating a lot of biodiversity above and below the ground, and starting to create lovely local veggies, seasonal veggies. So going back to permaculture, it teaches the ethics of fair share, and really I wanted to connect in and share this with the community. So I started reaching out to the community. I built a school garden for my son's school, and I started selling veg at the pub. I also around this time started going to the farmers market in Hythe, lovely farmers market, linking in and networking with local people that were into the seasonal veggies, and really got going with a sort of bit of a network to work alongside my my methods. So permaculture, it also teaches this sort of people care. So I wanted to connect in with the people a bit more and create the well-being that I was getting. I wanted to share with everyone else. So I started bringing in volunteers and looking at ideas of sharing the produce far and wide. And you're going to hear from Becky later about the Kent food hubs. And it was around a pub table in Hythe around this sort of time that we decided that we could come up with this sort of ethical distribution system that would allow us to get some of my produce direct to the customer. So I wouldn't have any waste streams that you sometimes create when you're sort of working at the farmer's market. So I started Rebel Farmer as a brand around this time to create a real platform for moving forward with this as my work now as new as a market gardener, and with a real emphasis on education. I also started to invite volunteers to come onto the plot and to share knowledge in exchange for labour. WOOF, Worldwide Work on Organic Farms, provided our first volunteers just as lockdown actually hit. And we had a really, really productive year there with people coming and live with us during lockdown. And we developed the business side. And we also started growing microgreens. You'll see some of those outside. They're these soil sprouted seeds, really highly nutritious. And these microgreens got me into lots of the local pubs and restaurants and retail spaces. And I started to be able to connect with all of the other seasonal veggies that I grew, like specialising in tomatoes and winter squash, and really started getting out there on the sort of local food scene here in East Kent. Each year, continuing to redesign and look at how we can improve the system and continue the ethics all the way. Over the last few years, I've been experimenting with heritage wheat, looking at long straw varieties of wheat. Food, it's a staple food product. Bread, there's a lot of interest in that. There was a sourdough revolution during lockdown, wasn't there? And we've started growing it without the use of chemicals, looking at how we can integrate people into the sort of processes behind growing and harvesting, milling, baking. I've also looked at seed sovereignty, part of the Gaia Foundation seed sovereignty movement this year, looking at how we can start a local seed co-op. I employ some local help now, just 1 or 2 days a week. We've got some super efficient tools to avoid the back-breaking work that we sort of all associate with farming. Farming's now fun with these tools. We've got solar panels that taken us off grid now with everything that we do. The design will continue to adapt and evolve. Carbon-free distribution of this produce, the waste, and people to come and help on the farm is the next big hurdle for me as we sort of look towards the possibility of carbon-positive farming. Each year so far, I've only just about broken even financially and spent the winter redesigning, re-evaluating these core design and these core principles. I continue to process local waste products and want to further that as much as possible. I hope to go for not-for-profit this year to continue with this ethical design process, this permanent culture of reciprocity and sharing knowledge and experience with a wider audience. I hope to inspire, facilitate more young growers and to continue to show the economics of a small farm future. We may not be able to feed the planet, but we can certainly feed our communities using these methods. By choosing local and seasonal produce, teaching our children how to use this produce, how to grow it, we can really make some meaningful change and really look at drawing carbon back out of the atmosphere, putting it back into the ground. We can all take part by joining our local community gardens or just growing a little bit on the windowsill. We can really create this permanent community, this permanent culture around food again, and hopefully find reconnection with the earth. Thank you all for listening.